The sun was shining bright in Willow Creek, a small, quiet neighborhood where everyone knew everyone. The houses were clean, the lawns were perfectly trimmed, and the streets were always calm. But in the middle of this peaceful neighborhood lived Karen, the HOA president. She was known for her strict rules, controlling nature, and a strange need to make sure everyone followed them exactly. To some, she was a hero keeping the neighborhood perfect. To others, she was a nightmare nobody dared to challenge. It was a warm Saturday afternoon. Birds were chirping, kids were playing in their yards, and the smell of barbecue floated in the air. Karen was walking down the street, wearing her usual crisp blouse and sunglasses. Her eyes were sharp, scanning every lawn, every car, every fence. Nothing escaped her notice. A small crack in the sidewalk? That needed reporting. A mailbox slightly crooked? That was a violation. And she loved to remind everyone about her authority as HOA president. Across the street, the Johnson family was having a small barbecue. Smoke rose from the grill, laughter filled the air, and neighbors casually chatted over drinks. Life seemed perfect. But perfect was about to shatter. Tim Johnson, the father, was flipping burgers and joking with his teenage daughter when suddenly, he collapsed. His arms flopped, and he hit the ground hard. The laughter stopped instantly. His daughter screamed, "Dad! Dad!" People rushed over. Heartbeats raced. Panic spread like wildfire. Karen, who had been walking nearby, came running over. But instead of helping, she stopped, her face tight with determination. She raised her hand. "No! You can't do that here," she shouted. "It's against HOA rules to perform CPR in the common area without approval." Everyone froze. CPR? Rules? At a moment like this? The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. A few neighbors whispered to each other, confused. Was she serious? One of the neighbors, Sarah, a young nurse, stepped forward. "Karen, he's unconscious. We need to act now." Karen shook her head firmly. "No. You can't. Rules are rules. I can't let anyone break them." The crowd stared. Some were shocked. Some were angry. Some were too scared to speak. Time was passing, and Tim lay on the ground, barely breathing. Sweat poured from his forehead. His daughter was crying, trying to hold his hand. Sarah tried to step closer, but Karen physically blocked her, standing rigid, arms crossed. "I'm in charge here. Nobody does anything without permission." A neighbor muttered under their breath, "This is insane, someone could die." Karen didn't move. Her expression was cold, almost proud. She believed she was protecting the neighborhood from chaos, but nobody realized the danger of her stubbornness. As minutes passed, more neighbors gathered. Phones came out. Someone called 911. Karen hovered near the group, still insisting no one should act. Her presence was intimidating. People felt trapped between fear of breaking HOA rules and fear of losing Tim. Meanwhile, Tim's condition worsened. His breathing became faint. His daughter screamed louder, panic rising. Karen, standing in the middle of the chaos, finally realized the attention on her. She felt a strange mix of fear and anger. Fear that something bad would happen despite her rules, and anger that nobody respected her authority. The camera of a neighbor's phone zoomed in on the scene. Some people whispered, "Why is she stopping them?" The tension in the neighborhood was unbearable. Every second felt like an hour. The audience watching this on video would already be thinking, "This is going to end badly." Karen took a deep breath and straightened her back. She believed she was doing the right thing. She thought, "If I let someone break the rules, everything falls apart. I can't allow that." But at that moment, she didn't see that her obsession with control might cost a life. A dog barked nearby. A neighbor tried to push past Karen. She raised her voice, shouting, "Stop! You're not allowed! Step back!" The scene was chaotic. Tim's daughter screamed. Neighbors argued. Karen's strict rules clashed with reality. The calm neighborhood had turned into a storm of panic and fear. And then, in the background, a faint siren started. Someone had called for help. Karen's face showed a flicker of concern, not for Tim, but for what the neighbors would think of her if they broke the rules. The camera zoomed on Karen's face. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, and tense. She was the center of attention, and she knew it. The audience could feel the suspense building. What would she do next? Would she finally step aside or continue to block life-saving help? The neighborhood was in chaos. Tim Johnson lay on the ground, barely breathing, while the air seemed to thicken with panic. People froze, unsure who should act first. Karen, standing like a statue, still blocked anyone from helping. Her sunglasses reflected the sunlight, hiding the flicker of fear in her eyes. "Move aside, Karen." "He could die," shouted Sarah, the nurse. Her voice cut through the tension like a knife. Karen's lips tightened. "I said no. You're not allowed to touch him. Rules exist for a reason." People whispered and argued, forming a tight circle around Tim. Some were scared to step forward, fearing HOA wrath. Others were angry, their hands shaking with frustration. One elderly neighbor muttered, "This isn't about rules anymore, it's about a life." Karen's stance didn't waver. She seemed almost proud in her rigidity, as if her control over the street could somehow protect them all from chaos. But the reality was terrifying. Tim's breathing was shallow, and every second mattered. Suddenly, Sarah tried to reach over Karen. In that instant, Karen grabbed her arm. "Stop. I won't allow it," she snapped. Neighbors gasped. Some shouted. One man yelled, "Are you crazy? You're risking a life over rules?" The tension exploded. Karen looked around, realizing she was the center of attention. Every neighbor was watching, their faces a mix of fear and anger. She felt a flash of panic but quickly replaced it with determination. "No one does anything without my permission," she said, her voice colder than before. Sarah's eyes narrowed. She weighed her options. Karen was physically strong and intimidating, but she couldn't ignore Tim. The nurse decided she had to act. As she took another step, Karen shoved her back, almost knocking her over. The crowd erupted into shouting. People were divided, some wanted Karen to give way, others were frozen by fear of breaking HOA rules. Tim's daughter was screaming now, tears streaming down her face. Her cries pierced the tension, echoing through the street. Suddenly, a loud siren screamed in the distance. An ambulance was on its way. The crowd exhaled slightly, hoping that help would arrive in time. But even with the siren, the seconds felt endless. Karen's eyes flickered toward the sound, not with relief, but with irritation. What if they arrive before she asserts control? Then something unexpected happened. One brave neighbor, Mr. Patel, stepped forward. He didn't argue. He didn't ask permission. He moved toward Tim, determined to help. Karen lunged in front of him. "I said stop." But Mr. Patel, calm yet firm, said, "This is a life, Karen. Rules don't matter now." It was a standoff. Karen's posture screamed authority, while Mr. Patel's calm defiance sent a ripple through the crowd. People whispered, secretly rooting for him. Some pulled out their phones, recording every tense moment. Time slowed. Every heartbeat echoed. The audience could feel the suspense. Would Karen finally give up, or would she risk everything to maintain control? Then, in a move no one expected, Sarah whispered urgently to Mr. Patel, "Do it quickly, now. We have seconds." Together, they gently but firmly moved past Karen, careful not to provoke her too much, and started performing CPR. Karen's face twisted in disbelief and rage. She screamed, "You can't do that. Stop." Her words were almost drowned out by the crowd's tension, the pounding heartbeat sounds, and Tim's faint gasps. Every compress and breath was a battle against time, against rules, and against Karen's stubbornness. The neighbors watched, some holding their hands over their mouths. The scene was chaotic yet heroic. For the first time, Karen felt a crack in her control. Her authority was being challenged in front of everyone, and she didn't like it. Not one bit. By now, the siren was closer, echoing through the streets like a warning. Karen's face turned pale, not from concern for Tim, but from fear of losing her power in front of the neighborhood. The camera, pointed at the scene, captured every tenth second, Karen shouting, Sarah performing CPR, Mr. Patel supporting her, and Tim's fragile body fighting to survive. And then, the unimaginable happened. A small gasp came from Tim. The neighbors froze. The silence was louder than any scream. Karen's eyes widened. Could it be possible? Was he responding to the CPR they had risked everything to give? The scene ended there, the suspense hanging in the air. The audience was left on the edge of their seats, heart pounding. Karen's obsession with control had been challenged, and for the first time, it seemed like she might lose everything. The ambulance disappeared down the street, sirens fading into the distance, leaving a heavy silence behind. The crowd of neighbors slowly exhaled, still in shock. Tim Johnson had survived the initial collapse, but the tension didn't vanish. Everyone's eyes were on Karen. For the first time, she didn't have complete control. Karen stood frozen, sunglasses slightly slipping off her face. Her jaw was tight, and her hands trembled ever so slightly, though she tried to hide it. The neighbors were whispering, but not to her. They were whispering about her. About how her stubbornness almost cost a life. Mr. Patel, the brave neighbor who helped with CPR, glared at Karen for a moment before walking away. His expression said everything. We did the right thing, and you could have ruined it. Karen felt a flicker of panic, but she quickly replaced it with irritation. She straightened up and tried to regain her authority. This neighborhood needs rules. Without rules, everything falls apart, she said, her voice loud, but shaky. No one responded. The usual nods and murmurs of agreement were gone. The crowd that had once obeyed her without question now stared in silence. Some were angry. Some were still frightened. But all had seen a side of Karen they hadn't before. Her obsession with control could be dangerous. A small voice broke the tension. She almost let my dad die, Tim's daughter whispered, tears in her eyes. The crowd turned to her, guilt and anger mixing in the air. Karen's face flickered with shock, but she quickly tried to hide it with a practiced smile. She cleared her throat and said, I only wanted to make sure everyone followed the rules. But no one bought it. Not anymore. Not after what had happened. By the next morning, news of the incident had begun to spread quietly through the neighborhood. Phones buzzed with messages, did you see what Karen did yesterday? And I can't believe she blocked CPR. Even some HOA members began whispering about Karen's actions. The very rules she had insisted on, the control she wielded like a shield, were now being questioned. For the first time, Karen felt the stirrings of doubt, not in the rules themselves, but in her power over others. Karen tried to shake it off. She walked through the neighborhood, clipboard in hand, inspecting lawns and fences as if nothing had happened. But the whispers followed her. The subtle glances. The neighbors pretending to smile but casting wary eyes in her direction. Every perfect lawn felt like a reminder of her failure. Meanwhile, Sarah and Mr. Patel were quietly celebrated as heroes in the neighborhood. People started talking about what they did, showing courage in the face of Karen's rules. Karen noticed the admiration in their faces. It made her uneasy. She tried to dismiss it, telling herself, they're just lucky it worked out this time. But the reality was undeniable, the neighborhood had changed. Karen's authority, once unquestioned, now had cracks. And cracks, once formed, tend to grow. Later that evening, Karen returned home and found a letter slipped under her door. It was anonymous. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. Rules are meant to guide, not to harm. Watch carefully, Karen. People are watching you. Her heart skipped a beat. Fear mingled with anger. How did someone dare challenge her? She had always been in control, always one step ahead. Now, she realized, the neighborhood might not follow her blindly anymore. That night, Karen couldn't sleep. Every detail of the day replayed in her mind. Tim's collapse. The neighbors ignoring her. Sarah and Mr. Patel moving past her. The letter. A chill ran down her spine. What if this was just the beginning? Across the neighborhood, families whispered behind closed doors. The quiet streets, once a symbol of her perfect control, now felt tense and alive with hidden rebellion. Karen had maintained order for so long, but for the first time, she sensed that her reign of control could be fragile. And so, as the moon rose over Willow Creek, a new tension filled the air. Karen's world, built carefully around rules and authority, was starting to crack. Every small act of defiance, every whisper, every glance, was a warning that she could no longer rely on fear alone to maintain power. The calm neighborhood had survived the collapse. Tim was alive. But Karen's perfect world, the world she had controlled for so long, was no longer untouchable. And for her, the consequences of that afternoon were only just beginning. The morning after the incident, Willow Creek was different. The sun rose over the perfectly trimmed lawns, but something in the air had changed. Attention buzzed quietly, like static before a storm. People didn't greet Karen with their usual polite smiles. Instead, whispers followed her everywhere, small looks of defiance in their eyes. Karen stepped onto her front porch, clipboard in hand, ready to patrol her streets as usual. But her usual power felt lighter. The letter under her door yesterday still lingered in her mind. Watch carefully, Karen. People are watching you. She shook it off. They're just nervous. They'll follow the rules like always. But even as she walked, she noticed small things that made her chest tighten. The Smith's lawn had a tiny, unauthorized garden gnome, right in the middle of the HOA no decor zone. Mr. Patel's mailbox was crooked, just enough to bother her. Even kids were playing on the sidewalks without adult supervision, something she had always strictly forbidden. The first ripple of defiance. She clenched her jaw. Later that morning, a neighborhood meeting was called. Not by Karen, but by several residents. She arrived, expecting the usual nods of respect, but instead found herself facing a room of confident faces. The very neighbors who had once obeyed her every rule now stared at her with determination. A man spoke first. Karen, we need to talk about what happened yesterday. Blocking CPR, that was dangerous. Too dangerous to ignore. Karen's heart skipped a beat. She opened her mouth, but the words stuck. She had rules. She had authority. She had always been right. Yet here they were, judging her, questioning her control. Another neighbor added, "We understand rules matter, but human life comes first. That's more important than HOA rules." Karen's fingers tightened around her clipboard. This can't be happening. They have to respect me. They have to. But the meeting wasn't over. Voices rose. Some whispered past wrongs, times Karen had enforced trivial rules harshly. Stories were told quietly at first, then louder, echoing around the room. Each tale chipped away at the fortress of fear Karen had built. The unique part of this moment wasn't just rebellion, it was subtle, organized, and powerful. The neighbors weren't shouting for chaos. They were quietly taking control, reclaiming a sense of community Karen had tried to monopolize. By the end of the meeting, Karen's confidence had crumbled. She tried to speak, to assert herself, but the words faltered. She could feel it, her influence was slipping. The neighbors were no longer waiting for her permission. The control she had built over years was evaporating in a single day. When she left the meeting, she noticed more subtle acts of defiance around the neighborhood. Signs were placed in yards, safety first, rules second. Children played freely on sidewalks. People smiled at each other in ways they never dared before. And Karen? She walked past them, trying to appear calm, but inside, a storm was building. That night, Karen sat alone in her living room. The house was quiet, but her mind wasn't. Every laugh she had heard during the day, every defiant glance, every tiny act of rebellion, it all replayed like a relentless loop. Her obsession with rules had collided with reality. And reality was winning. She glanced at the letter again, almost laughing bitterly. People are watching you. Yes, they were watching. And more than that, they were moving. Acting. Taking back what she had claimed as hers. Karen realized something terrifying. The neighborhood was no longer hers to control. Each small defiance, each whispered story, each act of courage was a thread slowly unraveling the carefully woven fabric of her authority. And in the quiet darkness, Karen understood she was standing on the edge. One more mistake, one more act of rebellion from the neighbors, and everything she had built could collapse entirely. The calm streets of Willow Creek were no longer a stage for her rules, they had become a battlefield. And for Karen, the war had just begun. Karen woke up that morning with a tight knot in her chest. She had spent the night replaying every moment of the previous days, the collapse, the CPR, the meeting, the whispers, the letter. Her world had shifted. The neighborhood that once obeyed her every word was no longer afraid. Instead, they were watching, waiting, and moving. She tried to convince herself it was temporary. People just need to calm down, she muttered, pacing her living room. But the moment she stepped outside, reality hit her like a cold wave. Across the street, a small group of neighbors had gathered. They weren't hiding or whispering anymore, they were talking openly about safety rules and the incident with Tim. Signs were quietly placed in yards, rules can wait, life cannot. Even children waved at each other freely on the sidewalks, laughing without care for Karen's strict prohibitions. Karen's heart raced. Her clipboard felt heavier than ever. She wanted to shout, to demand obedience, to reassert control, but she realized something terrifying: she no longer had the power to stop them. The neighborhood was no longer hers to command. Later that day, social media lit up. Someone had captured footage of Karen blocking CPR. Within hours, it spread online, shared from neighbor to neighbor. Karen watched, horrified, as comments poured in. How could she stop a life-saving act? HOA gone wrong. We can't let rules harm people. Her attempts to defend herself fell flat. The board of HOA members, who had once feared her authority, were now questioning her actions. Emails, phone calls, and complaints flooded in. Every interaction was a reminder that the carefully built walls of control were crumbling. Karen tried to attend another neighborhood meeting, hoping to regain her footing. But this time, the room was filled with confident, determined faces. Every neighbor who had once nodded politely now stared directly at her. They spoke calmly, but firmly. "You endangered a life, Karen," said Mr. Patel. His voice was steady, but the weight behind it was clear. "We cannot allow fear of breaking rules to come before human life." Karen opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. She realized, with a sinking feeling, that nobody would defend her this time. Even those who had once feared her were silent. She was alone. Her obsession with rules had become her weakness. Every strict regulation, every petty enforcement, every attempt to control, suddenly, it all looked fragile. She had thought rules were absolute, but she now understood the painful truth: rules mean nothing when life itself is at stake. That evening, Karen returned home, exhausted and defeated. She tried to plan her next move, but the feeling of being watched and judged didn't leave her. Every step outside her door reminded her that the neighborhood had changed. Every glance from a neighbor, every quiet whisper, reminded her that she was no longer in control. Even in her dreams, Karen could not escape it. She saw Tim lying on the ground again, heard the sirens wailing, and felt the weight of the neighbor's silent judgment. Each time, she tried to enforce the rules, to regain her power, but it slipped through her fingers like sand. By the end of the week, the cracks in her life were visible to everyone. The once pristine aura of control, the authority she had wielded so confidently, had eroded. Small mistakes became public. Every minor act of defiance by the neighbors felt like a hammer striking her fortress. Karen realized something she had never admitted before: her obsession with control, her insistence on rules over people, had begun to destroy her reputation, her relationships, and her sense of security. The neighborhood, once perfectly ordered by her hands, had begun to organize itself against her. And deep down, Karen knew this was only the beginning. The world she had dominated for years was crumbling, and nothing could stop the avalanche that her own obsession had started. Karen woke to the sound of her phone buzzing non-stop. Notifications. Emails. Messages from neighbors. Every screen she checked screamed the same truth: she was no longer in control. Social media had exploded. Videos of her blocking CPR were everywhere. People were commenting, sharing, debating. This HOA president endangered a life. Rules can't come before people. The posts went viral beyond Willow Creek. Even news outlets had picked up the story. Karen, who had once been proud of her reputation, now felt the walls closing in. She hurried outside, hoping for some sense of normalcy, but the streets of Willow Creek had changed. Children ran freely on the sidewalks. Neighbors mowed their lawns in ways that violated her rules, placed decorations, and even held small gatherings without asking permission. Every small act of independence felt like a strike against her. Karen's mailbox was vandalized, decorated with sarcastic notes: "Safety first, Karen last." Her pristine yard now felt like a stage of rebellion. Every glance from a neighbor felt accusatory. She was no longer feared, she was being laughed at. The HOA board called an emergency meeting. Karen tried to enter with authority, but the room was different. Every member of the board stared at her with cold seriousness. The video footage, the neighbor complaints, the public outcry, all led to one inevitable consequence. "Karen," the chair said, voice calm but firm, "your actions yesterday violated safety and ethical standards. The board has decided to remove you from your position as HOA president, effective immediately." Karen's face went pale. Shock. Anger. Denial. "No, this can't happen. I'm in charge here. I enforce the rules. People need order," she shouted, but her words fell flat. Nobody listened. Her control had slipped completely. Outside, neighbors had gathered. Cameras, phones, whispers, they were witnessing the downfall. Karen realized, in a sickening moment, that the very people she had tried to dominate now controlled her story. Every past slight, every petty rule she had enforced, was now being judged publicly. Even her personal relationships began to fracture. Friends who once supported her distanced themselves. Neighbors refused to speak directly to her. Her sense of community, the thing she had used as a tool of control, had evaporated. By evening, Karen sat alone in her living room. Silence replaced the usual hum of authority. The streets were calm again, but not because of her control. They were calm because her power was gone. She replayed the events in her mind: the collapsed neighbor, the CPR blocked, the video, the meeting, the board's decision. Every moment felt like a hammer striking the last remaining walls of her confidence. She had built her identity around control, rules, and fear, but now, none of it mattered. Karen's obsession had become her downfall. Her insistence on authority over empathy, rules over life, had destroyed her reputation, her influence, and her relationships. The carefully constructed world she had dominated for years had crumbled in just a few days. And yet, as the sun set over Willow Creek, Karen couldn't stop thinking about one terrifying truth: she was alone. Completely, undeniably alone. The neighbors had reclaimed their streets. The rules she had once enforced were now irrelevant. Her world, the one she had carefully controlled, had collapsed entirely. For the first time, Karen realized something crucial: control is never absolute, and obsession can destroy everything. The calm neighborhood had survived, life had been saved, but Karen's perfect world, built on fear and strict rules, was gone forever. The streets of Willow Creek were quiet again, but not because of Karen. The neighborhood had returned to life, free from fear and rigid rules. Children laughed as they ran along the sidewalks. Neighbors chatted freely over fences. Even the tiniest rebellion, like crooked garden gnomes or colorful decorations, was now welcomed. The community had regained control, not from fear, but from courage and cooperation. Karen sat in her living room, the walls of her house suddenly feeling taller, emptier, colder. Her perfectly organized world, rows of trimmed hedges, spotless driveways, and color-coded mailboxes, no longer mattered. Outside, the world moved on without her approval. She had ruled with control, with fear, and with rules, but she had forgotten one thing: rules without empathy are meaningless. Her phone was silent now. The notifications that once flooded her screen had stopped. The neighbors didn't need to check in with her, didn't seek her permission, didn't fear her anymore. Karen realized, with a sinking feeling, that the connections she thought she had built through power were fragile at best and gone at worst. For days, she wandered the house, replaying the moments that had led her here: the collapse of Tim Johnson, the CPR she had blocked, the anonymous letter warning her, the neighborhood meeting, and finally, the viral video that destroyed her reputation. Each memory felt sharper, heavier, more inescapable. Karen thought about what she had lost: not just her position as HOA president, but her pride, her influence, and the illusion of control she had clung to for years. Her obsession with enforcing rules had blinded her to the humanity around her. And now, she was alone. Completely, undeniably alone. Meanwhile, life in Willow Creek moved forward. Tim Johnson had recovered fully, and the neighborhood often shared quiet smiles and nods of solidarity with Sarah and Mr. Patel, the heroes of the day. The community had become stronger, not because of rules, but because of courage, empathy, and unity. Karen watched from her window as neighbors planted flowers together, children played safely on the streets, and families shared laughter. She realized she could no longer be part of this life in the same way. Her obsession had created a gap too wide to bridge. And in that silence, she learned the lesson she had avoided for so long: control is never permanent, power built on fear is fragile, and a single moment of stubbornness can change everything. As the sun set over Willow Creek, Karen's house stood in perfect order, but it felt like a prison. The world outside moved freely, alive with life, laughter, and small acts of kindness. Inside, Karen faced the consequences of her choices. She had ruled her neighborhood with rules and authority, but she had lost the one thing that mattered most: connection. The calm streets were safe again. The neighborhood had survived, even thrived. But Karen's perfect world, built on control, fear, and rules, was gone forever. And as she stared at the fading sunlight, she understood the truth she had avoided for too long: sometimes, the cost of obsession is losing everything that really matters. The story of Karen ended not with chaos or disaster, but with reflection, a quiet, powerful lesson that viewers would remember: rules can guide, but empathy, courage, and humanity must come first.